All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of What's What BR. We have Mike Steele with us today. How are you, Mike?
Good, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for making some time. What is your official title for anybody who doesn't know over at GoSep?
Sure, I'm the communications director for GoSep. I handle most of our media requests and inquiries as they come in. I handle some of the public appearances for our office and some of the outreach and those type things.
And what is it for, just if we break down, just to get the formalities out of the way, kind of, people hear GoSep, or, they'll hear, they see, we use the acronyms. I think it's every 5 minutes, there's another reason for GoSep to be doing something. But what is it for people who don't know?
So it's the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. Kind of in a nutshell, we were created after Hurricane Katrina through legislation, and we are the state coordinating agency. Anytime, and this is where it gets kind of complicated for the public because of our title sometimes, but anytime there's an event, a large weather event or something significant that happens in a parish, if a parish gets to the point where their resources are overwhelmed, then they can declare a state of emergency. The state can declare a state of emergency, and we can provide some state assets or other assets to that parish. It doesn't happen every time. It doesn't happen every time there's a thunderstorm or a little flash flood event. But if it's bigger events, the 2016 floods, a hurricane, those type things, those efforts are kind of pulled together so that we can make sure our local emergency managers are able to get through that event.
So that's kind of the, almost kind of the way the state would call FEMA in, the local parish can call GoSep in to kind of help. You guys have got resources, whether it be maybe some physical assets or just access to information or the ability to cut through some red tape, maybe just to get things possible. Is that right? Or
That's right. It's exactly the same type relationship. Our relationship with the parishes here in Louisiana is almost similar to our relationship with FEMA. If a state gets to the point where an event, some type of emergency is basically too great for that state to handle on its own, that's when we reach out to FEMA. But everyone tries to kind of keep it under control, within that jurisdiction, as long as possible. But we do have those backups and those assets available. Our role is basically like if we get into an event where there's a big flooding event, there's certain resources: the State Fire Marshal's Office, the Louisiana National Guard, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. A lot of those agencies have like search and rescue type operations available. So we kind of take a look at the big picture of what's going on with an event and determine okay, this agency with these particular resources can handle going to this area, and they can get there, quickly and more efficiently. And so we kind of coordinate. It's almost like a chessboard. You kind of move the pieces around and make sure that everyone's taken care of.
so tell me, for my curiosity, and somebody else asked as well, anytime we have these, I like how we all call them now events. I don't know what else you'd call them, but it's whether it be the flood event, the rain event, wherever it is, we hear, and somebody in my office had asked, they were like, "Hey, you can figure this out for me, get the straight answer," or not the straight, but when you hear all the time, whether it be a parish or, the state, it's like declaring an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, well, we all kind of know we're in that's news to me, or it's not news to me. It's like we know we're in the middle of an emergency, but then it's kind of like the after the fact. Like, why is that important from the declaring an emergency? We know there's water coming in. It's an emergency.
That's right. And a lot of times it sounds a little more ominous than it really is, because really what that does is just open up that ability for the state to provide, the parish with resources, or FEMA to provide the state with resources. So it's more, in some cases, it's more of an administrative type move that has to be made to legally let all of those things happen. We don't wait for a lot of that paperwork. Like if there's life-saving resources that need to be rolled out to an area, we of course get those resources rolled, and then you kind of catch up on some of those administrative things, as you get to it. But that's basically what it does. It's a way for us to tell the parishes, hey, we've taken this step, we've declared as a state. If you do the same thing at the local level, we can supply you with those resources as needed. And our staff will work with the parish to make sure that they get that document in place in a timely manner. Conversations going back and forth about when those moves will be made.
That's okay. So that clears, that's the formality of, hey, we're engaging. It's almost
Right.
like an engagement letter, I guess,
Yeah.
from a business
Right.
perspective. So tell me what's going on right now, dating ourselves. We're May 28th. We are about 10, 11 days removed almost from our recent event, with a little bit of, everybody got a little bit of rain, a lot of rain. I've talked to people in other states and told them what happened. They're like, well, you got more rain than we get all year. I was like, yeah, that's about what happened.
So we obviously appreciate a lot of the attention we get for the start of hurricane season. It's a great time to remind people to check your emergency supplies. I have 3 kids at home. 2 of them are one is 6, one is 7. So like batteries and different things in our supply kit get raided all the time, by our kids. And so the start of hurricane season is a great time to recheck those supplies. For families, it's a great time to think about a communication plan, because a lot of times nowadays you have a husband and wife that both work. You may have even in the summer you may have camp, or you may have vacation Bible school, or you may have different things going on, sports camps, where people are kind of spread out all over the place. Well, if we're hit with an emergency, how are you going to get in touch with all those people? Do you have all those contacts available with you all the time? Because a lot of times you see the communication network kind of break down, and it's difficult to get in touch with people. So we always recommend having a communication plan for your family. Have someone outside the region available that can be used as a point of contact, that you can all reach out to them to say, hey, tell mom and dad I'm safe, I'm on campus, or whatever the case may be. Think about those things and make sure you have those contacts with you. It's a lot easier these days, with iPhones and with cell phones and everything else, but it's also, it's a crutch sometimes, because if those things start to not work right, or the networks start having problems, people need to have a backup. So those are 2 of the main things that we recommend. Another thing right at the beginning of hurricane season is a great time to do an insurance checkup. A lot of times people have flood insurance, but they don't know exactly what that covers, or they may have hurricane insurance and they may not know how big their deductible is, and they're hit with these things almost as a surprise. But if you take the time to kind of learn exactly what your policies do, have those hard conversations with your insurance agent so that you get those things defined and know that you're covered in a way that you need to be covered. One advice family members gave me years ago was, whatever home you look at buying, make sure you buy something that that you can afford the repairs to that home, and make sure that you can afford adequate insurance for that home. So if someone's in the market right now, consider those things. Don't buy a home that taps you out so much that you can't cover it properly from an insurance standpoint. Those are things in Louisiana that are just kind of a harsh reality. We talked about this earlier. Again, we get attention at the beginning of hurricane season, but flooding and other severe weather can basically happen at any point during the year. It doesn't take a tropical system like we saw in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, Baton Rouge and Lake Charles over the past couple of days. So also hazmat events and different things can happen basically anywhere in the state or in most areas. So we recommend, taking those steps at the beginning of hurricane season, but we always tell everybody you need to be prepared year round in Louisiana.
Absolutely. One thing that came up, or 2 things when I was thinking that reminded me, that is too many people. I think you mentioned the crutch with the phone and the communication networks going down, but I've always said, and I'm guilty on some of this myself, I probably have now think about need to update. It's how many of us know, family's phone numbers these days.
That's right. That's
communication
absolutely
network
right.
might go down, but you might
Right.
drop your phone, in
Yeah.
the water. And if you can't turn that back on and you don't know, like I know my wife's number off the top of my head because I've known her so long, I had to, it was before the iPhone, but
Hmm.
my daughter's number, I don't know it. Come to,
Yeah.
to think about it, I really don't. So it's kind of like, maybe it's time, take a couple minutes just to write down some of those key numbers, stick it in a wallet, or put it in a Ziploc, put it in the glove box, something like that, because too many times we don't know those numbers, and you could easily be standing, being perfectly fine and just needing to let people know or need to check on somebody, but you don't even know how to get in touch with them because you dropped your phone in the water,
Yeah.
or left it.
And the cell phone providers and everybody have done a great job over the years. It's a mostly reliable network, but we did see a situation in 2016 where a couple of towers went down from a major carrier, and it knocked a lot of people's service out. Sometimes you can still maybe get a text through, but you can't get a phone call through. And I'll be honest with you, my background is in television news. I was a news reporter and anchor for almost 20 years, and covering Katrina, that was the most crippling thing. And it didn't matter if it was government, if it was us in the news media. No one could get a message out of New Orleans without driving it back to Baton Rouge, basically, for a couple of days. And when your communication system is that broken, it causes chaos. And when we see it happen, even to our family level, it can be a big problem. So again, we urge everyone to take care of that. Plus, with the way everybody is so spread out, there's not the mom at home in the summer with the kids, like maybe years ago. People all have jobs, they all have different activities going on. We're at the baseball field, it feels like, every weekend lately, and all kind of sports practices and everything. So it just shows the need to make sure you have that plan thought out.
Exactly. Get the numbers. How about this one? I have a friend that is a Navy SEAL. And so these
Hmm.
guys, elite, right? They know what they're doing.
Hmm.
So when it comes to things, I was talking with him and we were kind of going through, like, he's kind of, you hear people talk like, the bug out bag or backup, or get your
Yeah.
batteries, get all these different, have different things. The number one thing he told me, and I took it, I followed it, I have it in my wife's car, my car, I've got it in the bag. He told me the number one thing that everybody should carry. He goes, I'd tell you to carry this more than a firearm. He goes,
Hmm.
get a tourniquet and carry a
Yeah.
tourniquet with you. He goes, so you don't know, it could just be a car wreck,
Hmm.
and it could be a kid sliding into second base, and, bust a leg. And when you need something like that, you don't have time, you
Yeah.
don't have time to wait. So he said, get on Amazon, spend $30, get you 4 or 5 tourniquets and, like, stash them. So thought it was interesting.
And first, there's a ton of first aid kit options out there. Me and my sons have always, hunted a lot and done some different things. So I always made sure I kind of had those things in the past. But then it seems like nowadays you can go to, just about any of the big box stores or sporting goods stores. The big, everybody has these kits. If you kind of look around, like in the camping sections and everything, there's a lot of different options out there. So I've thrown a couple in our vehicles. We have a couple at the house, it's always good to have those things because the more you think out that process, even if you have to evacuate, think about some of the major evacuations in Louisiana. You can be stuck on the interstate, for hours at a time, depending on where you live and where you're trying to get to. So if you have those first aid kits, maybe the bottles of water and a couple of breakfast bars or those type things, anything available. What we've learned over the years is the more you do preparation wise, the easier the event and the recovery are. And there's still heartache. Don't get me wrong on that. There's still difficult things to go through, but it's been proven the more you do ahead of time, it'll make certain situations easier to get resolved. So that's part of the reason we encourage people to do that. Another big thing along these lines is an emergency cash fund. Have some cash on hand at your house in case the ATMs go down, the power's out. if you need to evacuate and to a hotel in North Louisiana for 2 days until it's over with, try and have enough cash to do those things. We know, people go through difficult patches, financially and everything, but if you can have those resources kind of in place, that's another great thing to have as part of your preparation.
It's funny you mentioned it. I had a question with my credit union not too long ago. Was asking them about the safety deposit box, and people all like, you hear people, I'll keep cash there, or I've got things put away. But I just asked them. I said, I've got some things. What if there's an emergency? Like, who do I call like on Saturday afternoon if there's a life and death emergency that I need to get into there? And they go, nobody. It's not going to happen. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm like, not just I was like, life and death. I've got a family member that's going to die if I don't get into that box. How do I call and how do I get in? And they're like, it's not going to happen. So if maybe if people are thinking, well, I'm going to hit the bank, I'm going to run and grab something, or I'm going to get cash out. Sometimes those businesses are now closing. It's now more acceptable, I think, when we see, not just after the fact or during the storm, but in preparation of businesses. I know in our company, we send people home. It's like, look, it's going to be bad, for the next 2 days, go home early. So it's not like you maybe can run to the bank, and the ATMs do run out of cash when everybody starts doing it, and they're not going to go restock them.
And the banks and the Federal Reserve System and everything, they do a great job. They plan out. We've had meetings with them, and they plan out things just like we do, where they try to make sure banks that are going to be in some of the hard hit areas have more cash on hand. In the days, as a storm kind of approaches a certain region. But if you don't make those moves, or if you don't, again, we focus a lot of attention on hurricanes because they kind of get all the headlines and all the attention. But, with that flood event in Lake Charles, I'm sure there's people that could have benefited, or in Baton Rouge, that could have benefited from having some cash on hand to help them get through a night or two, in certain cases. So, again, we have getagameplan.org as our website. There's a Louisiana emergency preparedness guide that you can download from that site. There's a 2-page checklist in that guide. And if everyone would just take a look at that page, there's things on there that are obvious. If you've lived in Louisiana any amount of time, flashlights, batteries, bottled water, canned goods, all those type things. But there's also things on that list like, copies of important paperwork, making sure that you have copies of your insurance paperwork, copies of your birth certificates, all those type things, kind of in a safe area, stored away, because the more that information is available, it'll kind of help with that recovery process sometimes.
No, that's you. I was just about to bring up the Get a Plan, website. That's what we're talking about is very common sense, but it's just our lives seem to get so fast paced, and we think, well, I'm going to do that tomorrow, or is it really going to get that bad? I don't think people realize that if you just do that planning just a little bit, like you said, I've got the little ones too, they're raiding batteries and you don't even know it, but getting, kind of what, making that plan happen to where if it does, start to rain and water comes, or when the big storm comes, or when anything, it's just kind of like, hey, we know what we're doing. We know where we're going to meet up. We know who to call. We've got a little bit of cash, on us. You're not having to solve all those different problems. It goes back to, I'm a real stickler in my house for like, when you're at half a tank, you need gas. That's just you just don't run it, down to empty. So it's because you never know what's going to happen.
It's bad on your car sometimes to run it to empty too. So.
All that debris in the bottom. Yeah. So to putting it together, I think if we can urge everybody, just to stop and think, what's I remember as a kid, and this is bringing up even in my own life, as a kid, I remember, we had a house fire but we, left. And I remember growing up, it was always like, if something happens, this is where we're going to meet up. Mm-hmm. This was before the cell phone, days.
That's right.
Right. But we don't do that, now. It's more of like, well, I'll call you if something comes up. And it's like, well, you may not get that call out. You might just leave your phone in the middle of an emergency. I'm sure phone's high on someone's list, but I see it all the time on a regular day, or people don't even remember to charge their phone, or they think it charged the night before and it didn't. So,
Well, and one thing that's really kind of changed over the past couple of years, with the whole Cajun Navy phenomenon, mentioned growing up, as a kid, I grew up kind of out in the northeast Baton Rouge region, kind of between Baker and Central. And it was a subdivision, but we were kind of spread out more than some of the newer subdivisions nowadays. But we knew 20 different families in that neighborhood, and you would have a storm hit or you would have some type of significant event. And I remember all the men in our neighborhood going around, the ones with chainsaws would bring them, and everybody just kind of went house to house, helping each other out. And technically, that's kind of what we're seeing, with this whole Cajun Navy phenomenon. Back then, we didn't have social media to kind of promote these things, but everybody still helped each other. And that's another big message that we try to tell people is get to know your neighbors in case you need kind of a rally point. I have neighbors on either side of me that I know I can call at any point, like with the hours I have to work here, while we're going through something. I know I can call one of them to say, hey, if you're at the house, could you go check this, at our house and make sure it's okay, and they'll do that for me. So if you have those connections, and this goes back to what we do from an emergency management standpoint, because we regularly meet with our local emergency managers and everybody else. You want to have those type conversations in what our guys here call blue sky days, because like you just said, when things are going down, you don't have time, to make those connections at that point. So do it under normal conditions so that you're not stressed out, as the event's going on.
it's funny as you mentioned that it popped in. My hobby is I fly airplanes. Is something I do, and I remember my instructor told me one time, he goes, look, what we do is inherently dangerous. Just at the end of the day, our job is to mitigate risk as much as possible to get it down to the lowest level, and then be acceptable, kind of with that risk. But we as pilot, check things. We have to plan. We run checklists. We run through things. We go. Doesn't matter how many times you get, in that plane. There's still a startup checklist. There's still a pre-flight checklist that you run every single time. To where, maybe some of our families, we need these checklists of, okay, let's, go to the Get a Plan, website, check off all the stuff every so often. It's going to make your life a lot easier and let you be ahead of the situation. And I like Terry works when I love how she says she never wants to be on a reactive, and that's, I think that's kind of where it's a good way to, put it, to where you owe it to, kind of your community, your family, to take these steps. This is not like you need to take a day off of work, and go run around town. This is like, sit down while you're at dinner and just talk about, like, hey, we have batteries. Have we been through this? Where are we going to go? These are the different things that you need to talk about.
I think that's a perfect example of what we're talking about. You may know that plane is 100% safe before you fly it that particular day, but that still doesn't stop a pilot, from going through those steps. And it's just that redundancy and that ability to stay focused and to stay, pay attention to those type details. That makes all the difference in the world. We struggle sometimes, and I talk to my kids about this. There seems to be some people have an attitude that everything can be mitigated, by government or there's never going to be any heartache. And so I try to be realistic with my family. Like, bad things happen, and some things just overwhelm, certain communities or neighborhoods or whatever. Like, you're not going to be able to stop all that. But the more things you do ahead of an event, again, a lot easier to kind of get through that event.
I think a lot of people just don't realize, even if I took it down to a different level, I was talking with with some of the hotel lodging. I think it's, people go, well, I'm always going to have a place. If something happens, I'm just going to go to a hotel. Well, the greater Baton Rouge area, there's only like 10,000 hotel rooms, total, from what I understand. I might be off a little bit there, but I believe that's, roughly the number. But it's like, you're not going to get people coming from outside communities and us being inside of an event and think you're just going to roll down the street, and check into a hotel and jump on your TikTok and just roll through the day. you need to, plan for these things. And just the way the mind works, if you know that you're supposed to have a little bit of cat, check that every so often to make sure that it's there. You never know when it was. If you're in my house, it seems like every day there's another $20 bill that needs to go to the school for something, and I could tell you that easily could get pulled out of that, emergency fund. So,
and one other thing kind of along these lines of setting expectation levels, nowadays, and it seems like this is kind of grown worse over the years, but a lot of times people start asking like, where's FEMA? The rain can still be falling in some areas. And it's like, some people start to ask those type of questions and they don't understand like that assistance level is typically not available for, in some cases, an extended period of time. There's a information collection needed to see how bad the damage was in certain areas. There's a whole process that we have to go before those FEMA assets are in. So a lot of times when they're saying like, where's FEMA? FEMA's already in town. I think over the past year, there's never been a point where we haven't had someone from FEMA here from the beginning of the pandemic all the way through the hurricanes that impacted us last year, plus the hurricanes that didn't necessarily have a big impact, but they required us to spin up our activities to a certain level. They've been here throughout that whole time. And so they're here, but like with that flood event the other day in Baton Rouge, we're still in the information collection stage. And then we can reach out to FEMA to say like, hey, what assets can be provided to help these homeowners. But, going back to the insurance thing, insurance is your number one protection, in dealing with something. And then when some of this federal assistance and everything becomes available, you can use that as kind of a backup or an asset. But it's important for people to know that there's just not going to be this immediate assistance available. Now, we're not talking about like search and rescue. Like obviously those things are there, but when it comes to the recovery side, it's a process and it takes, a certain amount of time in certain cases.
It's easier for me to say it than you. It's personal responsibility. You've got to make sure that you're taken care of in your family. You can't expect someone to be there, as the water's rising, waiting, to escort you along, to green pasture. You need to have a plan, of what you're going to do. And I agree. I think a lot of people do. We see that more here in Louisiana probably than most places, that we have these events that keep happening. And so you would think it would just be commonplace, and I'm afraid that, and I could probably go down a real rabbit hole in this and get on a soapbox, but like I can change a tire on a car, if I'm evacuating and, we blow a tire, I can make that change. But I know some adults that just cannot do it. It's kind of where I'm going with that is, you've got to have a plan. That was a thing, when I was going to drive, you had to learn how to change the tire in case that happened. That was part of the preparation. That was part of things. The next generation, are they learning these things? Do they know? Like we all talk about, get batteries, and get these things, but are we teaching that to our kids? Are we passing that down to that next generation of, this is what you've got to do? Like I remember, I haven't, shame on me, fill the bathtub with water. It was, all those different type of things,
right.
What are those options, but are we teaching that, to our kids, or are we just kind of, I heard it on this podcast, let me go do that real quick. Let them see you do it, let them help them pack the bag, let them go find, go get me a box of Band-Aids, and let's figure this out. How can we pack all this in? And then teach them where, your kit is, wherever it is, hey, go get the kit. We're going to get in the car. We're going to go. And then you're not running around trying to do everything at once.
That's right.
Well, look, Mike, I appreciate it, man. I think, it's hopefully we've beat the drum enough here for people to realize to take, 15 minutes at least to at least know what you don't know, know what you need to pick up next time you go to the grocery store.
And kids enjoy these type things, or at least I found that to be with my kids. They enjoy kind of being part of that process. So if we're talking to them about, this is who you need to call. If you're stuck somewhere and you can't get in touch with us, call Aunt so-and-so in Mississippi or whoever it may be, they kind of enjoy those discussions and they like being a part of that process. And so the kids, even when they hear, the National Weather Service alerts go off at the house, are like, do we need to do anything? Do we need to go to this part of the house or whatever? But I love the fact that they know, hey, that means pay attention to what's going on. So, we appreciate this discussion. Again, if I could plug getagameplan.org, for people to go to the Louisiana Emergency Preparedness Guide is on that website. Also, when we have an emergency going on, emergency.la.gov is another website that we use kind of as a consolidation point for any big information coming out from those local municipalities or parishes that may be impacted by an event, plus any information we push out from the state. We usually try to consolidate it there. Governor Edwards' staff does a great job on his websites and his social media accounts of kind of doing that as well. So if you're not following him, or if you don't go to his website on a regular basis, when we are really going through a big event, his staff, some of his staff actually used to work here at GOSEP. So we're very close with them, and we know they take, emergencies very seriously, which helps us out in the long run. So please take advantage of those resources and take a look at
them.
And
you guys have a podcast too.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I almost forgot about that. It's the GOSEP Get a Game Plan podcast. And so we've been doing it probably for about 2.5 years now. And we do just like with what we're doing here today. We kind of take an informal look at certain topics. Sometimes it's with the National Weather Service. Sometimes it's with people from FEMA, local emergency managers. We've had Jim Cantori on before. Craig Fugate, the old FEMA administrator, he's joined us before. So it's just kind of an informal look, but it kind of helps explains why we recommend the things we recommend and why we recommend taking the steps that we recommend, why we tell everybody you need flood insurance regardless of where you live in Louisiana. Why is some of that messaging so kind of we try to hammer those things home, so if people could check that out, we would appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll get a link to it here in the description. So, you should tell everybody, they got more important things to do than talk to me. So I appreciate you taking, some time to kind of fill us in. Like I said, hopefully this gets, top of mind, for some people, can make some things happen. So I think it's really simple. The website says it all. It's get a plan.
Yeah. So hopefully if everyone, joined in for this today, like you said, it's not something that takes, weeks to plan out. You can take a weekend and kind of take a look at a few of these things and get them in place. And obviously, again, we talk about weather events happening any time of year. Obviously, as we get into that August, September window, that's historically when we see our most problems, with tropical events and everything. So hopefully it'll be kind of quiet early in the season, but when we hit that window, that's when people really need to be prepared at that point. So, even if you do just a little bit day by day or week by week, make sure you start taking those steps, please.
I'll leave you with this. Everybody, I've got some buddies that kind of harass me over by, tourniquet carrying. And I tell them, look, you're making fun of me, but if you need it one day, you're going to be, glad I had it. And then tie that back in kind of where you're talking, being out on the ball fields, tourniquet's the extreme, but, everybody's always excited when that one parent's like, yeah, I got a Band-Aid or I got a Band-Aid in the car. That's right. The one, be that guy,
there's people in our office, same way, they're going to have every type of medicine and, so yeah, it's good to be that person.
Exactly. And don't count on that always being with that person. So do your own thing. So, well, Mike, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming in. We'll have to have you come in and kind of tell us some more of what's going on. We'd love to have you. And
sure. Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, man. Have a good day.
You too.